Funny thing, on the way to setting the game up, the designer emailed me a very nice email, considering the troubles I'm having, but he pointed out that I've got something seriously wrong here. This is fleet accrued damage points. That's supposed to be, it doesn't really specify that, but it's supposed to be across all the ships. Not every ship has that much damage. What this means is I've got, and in my solo game before, yeah, these are all solo, aren't they? I've got these set way too high, and it's actually going to be quite possible for fleets to be assembled and sent out. I'm going to figure out a way to quickly repair that situation or rectify it. I'm not sure quite what I'm going to do, but certainly right now I'm still well above those totals, and I'll get it down to no higher than those totals. How about that? So that at this point, at this starting point in the game, we'll have the fleets ready to start working. Now, last turn was kind of a bump, a weird situation with the war being declared and things not quite ready. I'm okay with the fleets being delayed. You can imagine maybe the war came as kind of a surprise at this point, or however you want to look at that. So I'll just lower those values of damage so that we can actually see some fleet action real soon. Something I wasn't expecting. Okay, some start of the turn bookkeeping stuff. Nothing fresh happening over here on the Summer Scroll map, but over here on the land battle, had a few things that happened. The first thing that you choose, random events, nothing came up. It did bring up an issue that I've asked the designer about, which is a Lesser Wrath has this possibility of events, epidemic events. Now, they affect your land troops, and you take an attrition check from that. But they also affect the effectiveness of the navies. And the effectiveness of the navies throughout the campaign was badly impacted by the epidemics. Now, my figuring was, hey, that's what these large numbers of hits on the naval units was meant to represent, was that these navies were in no position to fight for the first year. It ends up extending more than that the way I played it. But now it's very clear that these navies are going to be ready and able to launch some significant forces, more than the Russians, for example, were willing to put forward. And that's fine. It'll make it a more exciting game, even if a little ahistorical, perhaps. And maybe the player for the Russians should just be more cautious. I don't know. But we want to test things out. But the other thing is, if the epidemic comes up, it is supposed to affect the naval control. So the epidemic affects one player, and it affects his chances of getting naval control. Well, there doesn't seem to be a tie-in between the epidemic over on the ALW map and what happens on the Summer Scroll. So I may have an effect of that, where ships that are out at sea or whatever get affected by the epidemic and take some additional damage. I'm not quite sure how to handle that. Maybe they each just take an additional damage point or something like that. That would probably weaken their position significantly without destroying the game. Also, we have a weather effect. We have hot weather this turn, which means the attrition checks are going to be at +1. Now, that is kind of bad. I wanted to get my Russians moving, but I have my Russian commander down here, so at least for the first impulse, he's going to be working his way north. I don't know what his movement capability is, but I think it's pretty significant. I'll have to look that up. But otherwise, he has to wait until he can be reposted during the turn, which may mean this unit has to move forward without him, and he's really a big bonus. What I have there with the Russian army is not a bad commander. There's no question. Who is this? Yeah, there we go. General Keith. Okay. A good Scotsman to lead the attack. Other than that, the other thing I had to worry about was the initiative. The Russians chose to take the initiative. Now, I'm going to play with the rules as written to at least give it a try and see. The last time I played without them, I played with an optional rule that allows sort of an I go, you go format. I want to see how the rules as written work, because it does make it hard to withdraw from combat if you get attacked. The Russians want to go first because they can move in here and screen this before the Swedes can move into place. We'll see how all that works. And the Swedish army hasn't formed yet, even though the commander-in-chief is on the board. All right, well, it's about time to start the operations, but I'm going to do the naval side of things first, and well, there's not going to be much happening there because I didn't form my fleets last turn. So I'll be playing with the wind. Now, the wind does significant things on each impulse. Remember, if there's a gale, it's going to move in each of the movement point increments. So there may be a little bit of time in between. I got a couple of winds, but no gales going up. But one thing I did notice was the fog counter here indeed matches. There they go again. Little symbol on the fog for fog here. So I was correct in making that guess. It's not the circles and the darkness of those, it's the little star. Alright, I've given up on this light. I turned it off completely. I'm afraid it may have a wiring issue. Okay, so I decided that Lacey should have been transferred up north to Viborg and to command the army last turn. We were already at war, so he should have been eligible to move forward. He does not, as far as I can tell, replace Keith. Keith could be relieved of that command, but there has to be someone in command of that army, even though there's a personage there as well. Now, Lacey's going to be in command, but Keith gets to stay there with him. That's at least my understanding. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move from Viborg up to here, and you could say, well, gee, couldn't you just move a piece? Sure, but there aren't a lot of pieces on the board in this game, and every little move is kind of important. So one of the things I want to do is I want to detach some forces. I had to catch up. I had forgotten to put my auxiliaries into play, and they're very important. I also forgot to put my army on the board. What I was going to say is I have to leave a garrison behind, but apparently I've already established one, and I've got 3 of those battalions in place there. Okay, so to move, if I want to storm all the way up here, and I'm going to make that mistake here, I made it in my other game as well. I'm going to be it's hot weather, I'm going to be moving 3 hexes. Now, the movement allowance of my army is actually fixed and noted on here. It's got a movement allowance of 4 or 2 if it's got artillery with it. Now, that actually is a little slower than these columns. The way they're going to move for movement allowance, these guys have a movement allowance of 3, if I'm correct. So I don't know about that. I think these guys are actually down to 3 as well. So we'll go with that movement allowance of 3 because it's... The 4 is a limit, I think, rather than, yeah, I think that's an additional limit. So if I had an all-cav army, it would still only be able to move 4. So my base movement allowance is 2, okay? But I have 4 movement points because you get your movement allowance doubled. What that means is if I want to move here, and maybe I'll choose not to, but we'll see. If I want to move here, I'd be moving 1, 2, 3 movement points through what I think is woods. Okay, and yes. Woods says it's 2 movement points or 1 movement point with a guide. Well, I don't think I have a guide. So this is going to be a slow walk forward. Let's look at my auxiliaries. We have dragoons. Those might serve. Pretty sure pioneers might serve as well. Yeah, pioneers can be used as a guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire my pioneer off. This will allow me to move a little quicker. And he gets thrown down into the recovery box. And that'll allow me to move at 1 movement point for the woods. And I'll go 1, 2, 3 movement points, just zipping right along. But I only have a movement allowance of 2. So what I'm going to have to do, and I think I already kind of showed this before, so I'm going to have to look at this. My movement allowance is 2, but I moved 3 movement points. That means I'm going to have a +4 to my attrition table. Okay, well, am I at short range to the nearest hub? Well, my hub, I believe, is 20 hex range, but it's 20 movement points, and I gotta count those because I'm not sure. I thought it was just 20 hexes. So those are swamps. Let's find swamps in here. I think that'll be fen. They're 3 movement points each. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. This is looking kind of dense here. Yeah, 3, 6, 9. See, but I gotta look up because I've got this sucker here too, this depot. But he's not really in range. So 4 movement point radius, this is 2, 4. That gets me to there. I'm not gonna have that in range for my siege. Not surprisingly, I'm being an idiot. There's a road here, no doubt, and that's a 1 movement point, as long as you're moving along the road. So this is not an issue. As I had played it before, it wasn't an issue either. And I'm also within 4 movement points of my depot, so I'll be able to conduct the siege. So I moved 3 movement points, that's a +4. I am at short range to my hub because A, I'm within 20 movement points, and B, I've got this depot, which is actually an extender, and as long as I'm in range of it, I'm in short range of the hub. Okay. So that means I get to take a modifier from my unassigned operations points, and I have 2 of them, so I'd have a -2 on them. So let me grab a die. Yeah, I'm going to make everybody dizzy here. I need dice to record things. So I was at +4, and now -2 for that puts me at a 2. But here's the problem. This is forage depleted. That means I get a shift against me for that, for the range there. So actually I'm at medium range, so I only get half the points. So I only got 1 of them. So let's give that one back. So right now I'm at +3. I'm in army headquarters, so that's -1. I'm in enemy territory. Ooh, is it? Gonna have to check that. I know that it's friendly to the Swedes, but I think it's actually uncontrolled for the Russians. It's not unfriendly. It's not enemy. That's correct. So this does not count against the Russians. They just don't get the bonus for friendly territory. So they get a -1 for the army. And yes, I mean, I'm doing this much slower than I normally would. Leadership modifiers. Now, I have a formation commander who is a 5 tactical rating or leadership rating. This 3 rating indicates his ability to, down here, indicates his ability to combine forces that are in the same area. He can use that range of 3 to actually activate more than 1 force at once. That's probably not as important, although it does allow you to bring everything to battle at once from different directions. So I could, like, you know, bring a stack from here as well as my main stack and converge on some location to attack it, and I don't have to roll to bring them all together. But in the original Impulse game, I suspect it was more important to be able to do that. than here where I'm just moving one side at a time. Okay, so let's see. 5 gives me a -1, so I go down to a 1. This is going to be shifts on this table. I'm not big, but I've got hot weather, so I go back up to +2, and that's all we have here, right? We're not in any of these forage exhausted terrains, which would actually have shifted me twice. So now I got to look for a die. There we go. And I roll that die at not at +2. I get an 8, which puts me here, but now I actually go up 2 levels, so I'm going to take 30% losses. Now that sounds terrible, right? I just lost 30% of my units? No. I'm losing 30% of my units in effectiveness rating. Now it's still not good. It's a high number. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. I think I'm around 28. Okay, so that says I'm going to take 8 hits. There's some requirement that I take some of these on my cav, though. I have to look that up. Half the losses have to be on cav. So I'm going to be taking, and this is kind of hard to record. Oh no, these count as infantry because they're dragoons. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to be taking a D and an E. I don't have an easy way to mark this. I'll use the peace index chart there to put a D and an E, and they're going to be under this kind of greenish color for the Russians. No, that'll confuse me. I'm going to use the reddish color because that matches their units, and that's going to be their losses there. That's these 2 cav. Now, this unit is gone somewhere. It can be recovered there. That means I have 6 more losses. I don't want to take that on my cav. Now this is a pain because it gets rid of some of my cav, but those didn't really count for cav superiority. I could have taken more losses if I didn't have dragoons assigned as auxiliaries, but they're important for screening and for locating enemy forces, both of which are required. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I also took 6 Bs, and I'll mark them as well. And I'm just using these counters to mark who took the losses, because that's important a little later on. All right. Now, looks like I don't have a lot of time left on this one. That was my movement. I'm going to take a little pause so that I can move these videos onto the computer and combine. But we'll come back and see what happens. Among the things that happens, we have a blockade here. I can't start the siege immediately. So now the question over here is what to do with my Swedes. Historically, we had this horrible situation where the Swedes actually attacked under, I'm trying to remember the name. Guess we'll have to look at him here. Name that I should remember. Wrangel. Yeah. No, I couldn't read that. But I could remember from the Russian Revolution era. Same name, probably same family. He marches up and attacks or defends unsupported. Now, he's not in a position to defend here. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to try to move forward with my Swedish units. I'll let you know what the attrition cost is for that. We've gone through that kind of painful process already. I don't want to waste a lot of your time in the video on. Okay, so I've moved both my Swedish formations up to here. One was only a 1 hex move, and one of the nice things about the operational table, you'll see there's no possibility of attrition moving only one hex. The other guy got away with a 10% loss, which wasn't too bad. He doesn't have a lot of troops. Now the Swedes have a lot less troops on the field than the Russians do. I don't really want to engage here, not until I get some reinforcements and them in place, but my quality is a little better in some ways, not in terms of the LCE value or whatever. I also got clarifications on a number of other rules. Priests, for example, they're not going to increment the amount of damage that their own troops take, so they just bonus the LCE. Some others that kind of were, hey, your fudging ideas are more or less, they confirmed some of my fudging ideas. So for example, jumping to something completely different, the event from the ALW, if the epidemic happens, that was specifically omitted to try to keep this keep the naval action flowing. Well, the suggestion was to deal out those same initial levels of damage to the fleets, just to kind of keep them off balance whenever an epidemic happens, to make it less likely they'll win the area. And that works fine for me. That is actually much more severe than I would have given. I would have given a hit to every ship that's out at sea, which actually probably wasn't very accurate. Okay, so because it's also ships in port that we're going to be having trouble. So I've moved forward, and that was it's at slight cost, but otherwise I also had to give back my Pioneer here. He wasn't necessary because I was moving along the road. Another clarification was, yes, the guards should be set up down here, and I've thrown them over in there. I have some things like the Grenadiers and stuff that I'm not sure if they should have been available because they're dual purpose units. I'm going to make them available at the end of the year, along with everything else, which is probably skewing things, but that's okay. That's what we're working with. So that's the end of the land here. Now still, I don't have my fleets formed on this map. I could have formed them with the new damage numbers, but hey, they haven't left port yet, whatever. So there's not a lot I can do here. And in fact, it was suggested, hey, you don't really have to do the winds. You don't have to roll them if there's no chance of them doing anything. That's a reasonable solution, except that they could pass over and do some damage. But I think the chance of that is about equal for both sides. So ignoring the winds when there's no ships out makes some sense. So we're done with the first impulse on this turn on both maps. And that means I get to start the siege. Okay, so now here on the second impulse, and I've taken care of this, I rolled winds, nothing more, because, again, it was suggested that I not roll winds if nothing's at sea. That would work, but I don't know. It's not that big a problem when you're doing other stuff on the board anyway. So anyway, I have this blockade going on, and I want to extend it to a siege. And I can do that. I can invest it. That's my next step. And I believe I get to, I immediately at this point calculate the siege defense value. Let's set some of the light out there. It's awfully bright here in the morning. Oh, that's not nice. All right. So the first thing I have to do, I have to count this up. Fortification grade. Now this has a red circle, or red one that makes it grade 2. Okay. It is not earthworks. Well, now I got to ask if he's made his garrison. And if it's under the minimum or over or equal to the maximum. Let's flip this over so I can see it. That's number 1. Looks like he has a 1-point garrison. That may be under the minimum. No, that is the minimum. So he has no penalty for that. Is he adjacent to a river or minor river? No, but this is weird. He's adjacent to the coast. But it's not a regular coastline there. That's a lake. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. That may be worth one. He does have some sort of water access there. Does not have a depot. Water access. I'm going to guess he has that. So right now he's up to a 4. Certainly isn't a port. Siege artillery factor. I'm not at a lodgment yet, so that doesn't come into play. So I'm at +4. I have no marine or boatmen present. Defensive flooding is not an option here. At this point, I have to pull a garrison leader. Now, this is kind of weird. The Swedes, because it's a fairly small force, it'll just be a general, but I throw this engineering leader in as well. And go in my magic mystical Hindi incense burning cup that I got off a dead Swami. And here's what we have as a leader. Now, he is timid. He has 2 little yellow things, and that is bad. Put him up here as a leader. Now, why do I have a dragoon assigned as an auxiliary there? So I was at +4. He ends up going to +3. The attacking leader is not timid. In fact, he's aggressive, so that brings me down to 2. And we don't have an engineering leader in play. It's not a Muscovite garrison. So we have a base value of 2. Now, I write that down at this point. I'll come back because I'm not sure I can go any further on this phase. I think I just did the investment, and I get to mark that 2-point value. You know what I can do? I can use a Sea Lord's counter to mark that siege resistance value. So indeed, I do not get to make a roll on the siege table at this point. Now, going to the Swedes' turn, I have a problem. I kind of want to attack. I want to try to relieve this siege, but I'm outside the range of my depot if I attack up to here. And there's a problem if you fight outside the range of a depot. Your quality of your troops goes down because you don't have ammo available. I'm at a disadvantage already in a lot of ways. So I kind of want to wait until I can make my attack there. So I'm going to hold off for this impulse, and we go to impulse 3. Now this is dangerous. There's a good chance that's just going to fall. But I don't want to lose my army at this point in the game. I want to make the best attack I can. I can always retake this someday and regain the edge and prestige there. This isn't like the 41 scenario where I'm in a real rush and must, try to do the best that I can. And actually in that scenario, I think the best move is to simply abandon this. It might be in this one too. This doesn't serve much purpose, but it does slow the Russians down and cause them some potential. Okay, now here in the third impulse, I'm going to continue conducting this Russian siege. I have one of these siege artillery batteries, which I think kind of dual purpose in this, not like the dual purpose units, but I think they also count towards the strength of this battery, which they wouldn't normally. I'm going to task that with the siege if that's necessary. So I look at these values here. I'm going to be rolling on this table. I'm on the investment. I'm trying to make it into either the approach or the lodgment. I don't have grenadiers, but I do have a pioneer. And I have a siege artillery. I can't use that yet, but I can use the pioneer or the sapper. I only have one of those. Oh no, I have two sappers. Alright, I'm going to use one sapper up on this to give myself a +2 on the approach. And I think I have to roll the siege. I think the siege table. I seem to remember the siege resistance value has an effect here, but maybe I'm mistaken. Let me make sure of that. Okay, I don't think that's a factor, but what I can do is I can task not just the one. God damn it. I can actually task both my. Oh, those are priests. Gonna say both my sapper. Oh, I put them back here. Both my pioneer sapper guys. They'll help at this point, and they're actually kind of put on the map with the siege. They're gonna conduct work throughout the entire siege before they become exhausted. So I'll be rolling on here, but then I conducted an attrition check, and I should have conducted one for the investment action too. So I'll do 2 of them in a row. So right now I'm at +4 to the table, it looks like. And I don't see the siege resistant value being there. I looked in the rules, but I'm really bad at skimming and finding something. So I get a 12. I'm at a lodgement now, which I think means that I have to recalculate my siege resistance value. And my leader is aggressive, which I think allows me to actually launch and escalate immediately. Now it becomes important that I do actually check that attrition roll I had to make, because I'm allowed to make this escalade. So we've already seen an attrition roll. It's not triggered by the OMT. Well, I'll come back after it because I don't want to work my way through it again. Basically, every time I deal with one of the tables in this game, I just never get used to them enough. And especially on camera, it's really hard for me to work through it without just buzzing through. Okay, took a couple of losses. 3, I took them on C-class units. Sometimes it's better to take them on better class units because you get more of them back, so I don't know. Anyway, on the escalade table, what I'm going to do is I look for the fortification grade. That's a 2. And there are modifiers to that. Combat effectiveness comparison. I think I've got a combat effectiveness of B here that I'm allowed to use. Just because I have so many B units. I don't want to look that up. And here, this is Garrison 1, who is a D. So, I don't know if we do that straight up. Yeah, it's per level. So, I've got 2 points in my favor. That drops me down to a 0. But there's no breach, so it brings it up to the 1 table. And I simply roll a die. There are modifiers for grenadiers, but I don't have any in the game yet. Why? Well, I wasn't sure that I could set them up. I think they're supposed to be here, but I'm bringing them in with the guards or something. See, they're dual-purpose units, and they weren't specifically announced in the setup, but there is kind of a, well, you get all your auxiliaries. Well, you don't, because you don't get all your dragoons and stuff as well, so it's just not clear. So I'm on the 1 table without any mods. I roll a big bad 8. That does 0 to the attacker and 2 with a surrender result to the defender. So the defender is actually eliminated. He took a D and an E, and I've got to remember that and place that. This has been captured, and we've completed our offensive campaign. It's not done yet, but it will be at the end of this turn. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of bookkeeping to take care of this. So now, what was left, the unit that was there was wiped out, but what was left was these dragoons. So they are thrown actually into the available box. Kind of weird. I think they should go in the recovery box. I'm going to put them there. I think that's the intention. They count as prisoners of war, and that's why they should be in the recovery box, because they're not a formed unit ready to do that. And give a C quality prisoners of war strength, which means that if some Russian units then get captured, we can make exchanges. We also captured the general there, who, well, too bad that he's been captured. Doesn't seem to be a leader loss check in this circumstance, so that's fine. Now, I also detached my own little Russian garrison here, and we can see what's there. We still got the army and we got the garrison. This did not go well for the Swedes at all, and they detached that, I think, over here. A couple of their damaged units. Basically, because they're within range of a garrison, of a depot, very soon they will be, not this turn, but next turn, they'll be able to start recovering their strength just by not moving. That's kind of a nice factor of not doing that. Now, I did a siege operation here, but I did not use my artillery, actually. I had it ready to be committed, but I didn't actually have to use it, because you can only use it once you get at the lodgement stage. It doesn't affect the escalade itself. We just charged in, so I don't lose my depot. Otherwise, depot gets reduced, I think, automatically, as far as I can tell, just for doing siege artillery. So you really have to kind of pump up your depots throughout the game. And now the Swedes are going to have to fall back, I guess, towards Friedrichshain and this river line, which probably is where they should have gone to begin with. And indeed it is the Swedish move, so I will probably try to withdraw from these. And I'm going to do that the cheap way. I just moved both my stacks 1 space. That way I don't have to roll for attrition. A slow walk is fine, and to tell you the truth, that's about as defensible as this location is. The only thing that's bonus here is that I've got a strong garrison. So what I'm more interested in doing is just keeping an army around to prevent this from falling. We see how easy this siege was once the Russians could get to the location. I could have tried to chase them off. That would have been a bit of a crapshoot, and I would have been at serious disadvantage without the depot there. All right, that moves us to the 4th impulse, and there's probably not a lot going to happen. So during the Russian activation, they actually marched their way down here. Now that's 4 hexes with a movement point value of 2, or a movement allowance of 2. That meant they had a big +8 on the operational movement table. They ended up maxing out the chart, taking 30% losses, heavy losses there. They also, this should actually just be a -1, but I'm using a -2 here to just help remind me, because that is truly degraded to the minimal level. It means that I can no longer draw supplies. Well, I can no longer get the advantage of supply from this hex or any of the surrounding hexes to it. Forage will be worse in those. I won't get this bonus, which right now is just a single point for the unassigned OPs for being in reasonable range of St. Petersburg. Essentially, the foraging mechanisms, the supply lines are being clogged bringing food now. Normally you can get some additional food from the area around you. The Swedes pulled back their 1 hex, taking the safe route. Why did the Russians charge forward? Well, because they're at the end of the turn. Now, as far as my reading of the rules, I can maintain this current offensive campaign and move closer to Friedrichshain here, which is not a problem. But the problem is I need this space at the end of the turn to build a depot. If I built a depot here, which I could also do, it wouldn't get me into range to make the attack. So for next turn, I need the depot here to launch my attack forward. In addition to that, I'm gonna do the post-turn cleanup and administration. All right, so now that we're actually in the war here, I'm gonna start worrying about orders. And in this particular case, well, I've got to throw these into the pools because I am at war, as I said, and they go up into the various pools. And we'll start dealing with the naval orders. Now, we already dealt a little bit with the land orders. I'm just a little behind the time here. Uh-oh, I've got some Swedes in my cup here. I'll dump them out. They're all in the officer's mess, and they are quite a mess right now. All right, so this is happening simultaneously here, but both sides will get a draw from the cup. And in this case, I think we're late enough I can remove the Archangel Ice. I think it's out of the way. Next turn they could actually make it in. Okay, so I've got two choices, a show of force for Kronstadt and a null. Now, I think the null automatically goes back in the pool. I don't think I can choose that. So I am now being requested to do this, a show of force to Kronstadt. Now, it was my choice to say, hey, I'm ready for an order. What I do here is now I get to look that sucker up, and we look under the Swedish side, and we find what that particular one is. Show of force Kronstadt. I've actually done this one in the other game that I played. I need to take it. I need to send a fleet basically to here. It could just be a squadron, some kind of formation, and it requires that the hats are dominant in the Reichstag. Well, they're actually not, but they're only removed when the caps are dominant, so they've become available and then it was not removed. If I succeed in this, not only do I get, well, I don't get prestige. What I get is successful orders, which whoever has the most gets, I think, a point of prestige, if I recall correctly. But it does give a bonus to the negotiations table. Well, in effect, -2. It actually will lengthen the war. And I have to sit out there for four segments. I don't have a real choice here. This is something I want to do. Now, alternatively, as we move down, I may end up getting a convoy, in which case I'll want to draw an escort for that convoy. But that's not really up in the open right now. So that's what we have for the Swedes, and I'll look up what the Russians pick up and see what they're going to do. I may not be able to launch this right away. I've still got, I've got ships that could do it, but they're still somewhat damaged, even though I reduced the total amounts of damage. For the Russians, I actually drew a more interesting one, support of Lacey's military campaign. Now, in the base Sommerskrala, if I can send a galley fleet to the correct location, which right now is actually going to be Friedrichshain. Well, see, this is weird because I'm kind of playing it differently. Actually, this would be here, which means it wouldn't advance. I would have had to send the fleet here by my understanding of Sommerskrala, which almost doesn't make sense. It should be the next space forward. But that's kind of how I'm looking at it is, well, now my next goal is to take Friedrichshain. I have to take them in order, although there is a split decision at some point. I'm not sure where it is. Bjornborg is down here. That's going to be after Abo. And then here, go up to something called Kopro, which I think is heading up that way. I'm not sure. somehow or another we end up at Stockholm using either route. Anyway, what's going to happen here is I can essentially send the fleet to Friedrichshafen, and it then provides some artillery support to the units which presumably will be sieging it at that point. It also can give a floating depot there. I think I'm allowed to do that with the convoy. Well, with what I would be producing. Now, in order to get this floated off, I'm going to need a galley fleet, which means I'm going to need a detachment. Right now, my fleets aren't really ready either, so I'm probably not going to launch them yet. I'm going to go through some more repairs. Okay, well, we got our first reinforcement request to come through. The Swedes rolled a big old 0, or a little old 0, and that gives them 3 points of replacements, which means they get to pick, essentially, stuff off their menu here. Now, this is a lot less important now that they actually have a working fleet, unlike in my other game. But playing it as intended, I'm allowed to buy the flagship at 3 points, and that's what I have available. I could buy a ship of the line for 2. I could buy these smaller ships for 1 each, and I've kind of house ruled I can get galleys at a ½ point each. I have an order in hand ready to be taken advantage of. It's this show of force. I don't think I should be using a galley for that. So what I'm going to take is a ship of the line and a ship of the line D. And we'll actually, well, assuming I have the counters, there's a ship of the line. And I'll put that in. It has to be a Karlskrona. And let's see if I have a ship of the line D. It's a frigate. I don't see an extra ship of the line D kicking around, so I'll actually just take a frigate there. So I think I'm limited by countermix. Okay, and then I remove them from here. The Russians did not get a successful roll. Had I done the draft, they would have succeeded there with the -3, and in addition, they would get more repair points. However, I don't want to remove a regiment at this point, and that's kind of how I'm faking the draft. And I'm also on the administrative phase over here on this map. And when I start looking through there, well, check for campaign plan success and failure. This is a 1-point campaign. I could declare it over and grab a point of prestige for the Russians. The Swedes don't lose any. They lose half the prestige gained, rounded down. So that's not going to affect them. This isn't an important loss to them. The problem with the Russians doing that is I spent 3 points on that campaign. I can move forward. There's a limitation to declaring an offensive campaign if you're too close, though. Yeah, okay, I'm going to declare it successful. I'll take my point of prestige. And that clears this campaign out. See, my thought is, okay, I could inch really close, but there's some kind of limitation that restricts you from declaring a campaign when you're close to it. So now I have the option to start another campaign. This is the point when the Swedes are the weakest. So that's precisely what I'm going to do. I'm going to declare that campaign for Friedrichshafen, and I'm going to use my 2 remaining command points for it. Now that means I'm at a bare bones attack here. This may not work. It's late in the year. Well, it's not late in the year, but I don't have a lot of points left. I'm really regretting having thrown 3 in to go after this, because that's, you know, most of my force. Of course, that's what they were set up for in the original game. So I thought it would be safer. All right. For supply, I don't have to worry about any of this. I've got lines of communication back to my hubs. I'm allowed to do administrative movement, but that's not going to get me anything close to me. The Swedes could bolster some of their force, though. There's definitely that possibility. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. I could add some troops here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to suck out these What's that, a D? Actually, I don't even have to remove these. I don't want to do that because these troops are going to recover if I don't move them. And they're not in good shape right now. Okay, so we push on farther. Redeployment and reorganization. We get to reorganize headquarters. Well, this is a big deal. The Swedes are going to combine their two armies, or two columns, into a single army. And that'll be this marshal. Get rid of our general there, and we get our captain general posted to that too. And that, hopefully, there's room for all of this. Woohoo! I think he's down here. Okay. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I only have 10 of these. That means I can only have 2. I'll get rid of a sapper. And he goes back to the available box because he's not hurt. Now, I don't think reinforcements can be called on a non-quarterly turn. Can't remember. I don't have that marked with a Q, so I'm going to check it because I don't trust my memory. I marked those sitting out with some tequila. And 4.35. Once per turn. Cool. Okay, so I've got a roll for that. And, well, I'll do that right now. If I can find my dice. It's nothing too exciting, you know. I mean, so much of this is, hey, I got to roll something on a chart. It all works out nicely. I like games with a lot of different luck factors like that, but it's not really exciting to look at, which is why a lot of this game is going to be played. A lot of this game is going to be played kind of, you know, with me in the background and then coming back and giving reports. And that's fine. That's how I actually like to do things. So I make a roll here. I've got no ascendancy. I get a 7. That's not going to be anything. If I did get anything, any troops, those are just guys in Sweden released. And then I have to form a convoy, and it takes me a turn per, I don't remember if it's unit or brigade equivalent, that I'm going to take putting that convoy together, and then I have to actually sail it over to Finland, and there's a possibility of it getting intercepted. Okay, so really be nice to have these printed out on a separate sheet, and I'm not able to do that, unfortunately. Okay, so we checked reinforcements. Replacements are a quarterly event, so I don't check them, but I think the other part is per turn. Or is it? Yeah. So units that didn't move have an ability to boost themselves, and that's particularly important, not for the Russians. All their stuff is either in good shape or has been active. But for the Swedes, where essentially everything in the garrisons, is that a dot there? Doesn't look like it, it's a tree. 1, 2, 3, so I'm not in range here, but garrisons 3, 4, 5, and 6 all get to go up a level. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now next turn I'll be able to shift them into place and they'll be in better shape, or if I've lost Friedrichshain, I have something to fall back on. Okay, I already posted my leader up there. And we have recover auxiliaries. That again is off a little chart, which I have to find. Auxiliaries. Oh, there's recovery tables in here. This is really much harder to do. One-handed bending over with a camera, and there it is. Okay, so here I have some dragoons, and I need a 0 through 4. They are not finished, so I get no bonus on them, and I don't get them. And for the Ruskies, I've got Pioneer Sapper and Sapper. Say the Pioneer will use his die roll, 0 through 3, and the Pure Sapper comes back. So I'll be set up for another siege. Now, that's kind of good because I'm in trouble here otherwise. I'm hoping to kind of blitz into place. And now we flip back to the sequence of play and look to see if there's anything else here. Voluntary strategic redeployment. That's kind of off-map movement, I think, if it applies. Final supply. We'd be looking at issues with the depot reduction. There's a chance of forage restoration. That only happens if you're far away from, if there's no combative units anywhere near it. So this is going to stay wiped out as long as it's anywhere near the front, and that creates a bit of a problem. Areas become less and less survivable as you go on through the game. And then we move the turn marker forward, and oops! I don't remember where these go. These are Finns. I'm going to have to look up where they go. So this is kind of a weird situation. Those Finns, I'm throwing them all into Friedrichshain. The question is, what quality are they? They're reinforcements, so they're not like replacements. Replacements would come in at quality E, the worst. But instead, there's the question of, well, should they have the same penalty the rest of the Finns do, or do they come in at B quality? That's a good question. If they were not part of, they're essentially the 2nd battalion of regiments that are already on the board. So the only thing that I can figure is that they're being mustered on the field, essentially. They're not going to be at combat ready status. It's not like these are units being drawn from elsewhere and maybe training on the way. This is them being brought together. So I'm going to give them that -2 penalty right off the bat to give them that demorale. And they're all are D quality. So they're all there. And now we move this, and I don't remember where this was. I think it's in August. So we go to August, September, and that'll fit there. And who's this dude? What's he doing there? Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure why he's there. I think he was injured from the last game. I gotta look him up. He may be my commanding admiral, and I just didn't swap things out. I think that's the... he's just a very good Swedish admiral that I somehow lost track of. Anyway, I didn't look in the reinforcements because I don't think that's where he came from. I think he was there accidentally. I guess we're ready to roll into the August-September turn then. And we'll start.